Welcome to applying for state funding for sexual assault services. This application is specifically designed for rape crisis centers, state coalitions, SANE programs, and culturally specific organizations. This training module will provide a brief overview of state allocated funding for sexual assault services in Utah. We'll guide you through the application process, including its required components, discuss allowable and unallowable costs, and review award requirements. Additionally, we'll cover specific details relevant to each program category. All the information presented today will also be included in your application instructions for reference. In 2023, the state of Utah awarded the Utah Office for Victims of Crime $3.2 million in ongoing annual funding to support sexual assault services across the state. Additionally, $5.1 million in one-time funding was allocated to be distributed over 3 years. UOVC was authorized as the state agency responsible for administrating these funds. This achievement was the result of a collaborative effort involving many stakeholders who contributed their expertise, provided testimony, and dedicated countless hours to coordinating data and reports. In partnership with the Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault and Restoring Ancestral Winds, UOVC developed a comprehensive funding plan to strengthen and expand sexual assault programs statewide. To ensure equitable access to services, UOVC has worked diligently to allocate funding in a way that reaches all areas of the state. This approach prioritizes the delivery of core services regardless of where an individual was victimized, ensuring that every county receives an appropriate share of resources to meet the needs of its communities. The following chart illustrates the allocation of state funding by category over the past 3 years. Variations in funding amounts reflect the availability of funds and the needs identified in prior year requests and expenditures. Please note that this will be the final year the legislature has approved the use of one-time funds. As a result, the total funding availability for the 2026 and 2027 award year is anticipated to be $3.2 million, representing a 45% reduction compared to previous funding levels. Now we will review the process for the state funding application. These instructions apply to all funding categories. We will provide a brief overview of the forms to be completed, but all applicants should read the funding instructions for their own category. All of the forms mentioned here will be available in the funding instructions document and the grant solicitation page on the UOVC website. The application will consist of the following elements. A scope of work is a detailed outline of what your program will accomplish with the funding you receive. It defines specific activities your organization will carry out to meet these needs of the community. The scope of work is essentially your roadmap. It explains how you will use the funds, what services you'll provide, and how you'll measure success. It's also an agreement between your organization and the funding agency to ensure accountability and transparency. This document will guide your work throughout the funding period and serve as a tool for reporting your progress. Budget Ledger is an Excel form provided by UOVC designed for submitting your budget proposal for state funding programs. As part of the application process, you are only required to complete the Budget and Balance tab at this stage. Be sure to carefully review the accompanying budget instructions before filling out the form to ensure accuracy and compliance. It is especially important to take the time to provide clear explanation and justification for the costs requested within the budget. Here is an in-depth look at the application's required attachments. For job descriptions, every employee's position funded through the grant, you'll need to provide a job description. Each description should include the position title, key responsibilities, and the qualifications or skills required for the role. Make sure the description accurately reflects the most current responsibilities of the position. For organizational charts, your organizational chart should clearly outline your agency's structure, starting with top leadership like the executive director or CEO, and working down to department heads and staff. Be sure to include all grant-funded positions, such as program coordinators or outreach specialists, and use lines to show reporting relationships. Keep it simple and easy to read, avoid clutter, and make sure it fits on one page. If you are a part of a large agency, such as a hospital, only include the organizational chart for the Victim Service Program. If your funding request includes contracted fees, rental agreements, or similar agreements, you must include the relevant contracts with your application. These contracts should clearly outline the scope of services, terms, and payment details to meet funding requirements. If a contract is not yet finalized, you can submit it later in the award year once it is in place. The civil rights and discrimination policy training must be completed by the applicant's designated point of contact. It's essential that the individuals responsible for managing the grant are trained to understand and comply with these policies to ensure non-discriminatory practices are followed throughout the grant period. Once the training is complete, you will be provided with a link to a certificate of completion, which can be uploaded to the Files tab of your award. UOVC uses an online grants management system for all applications. You will need to submit your application through the system and attach all required documents. The funding instructions include a step-by-step guide to help you complete the application. However, I will now provide a brief overview of the online application process. To access the online application and the GMS system, you will go to the UOVC website, which is crimevictim.utah.gov. The two most important links or tabs for you to be aware of are the Grants tab and the Training tab. We'll first go to the Grants tab. Once you click on the Grants tab, you'll notice on the left-hand side of the page that each of our federal and state awards has its own tab. There's a lot of useful information on each of these tabs, especially eligibility requirements and reporting requirements for each grant. Next, you will go to the solicitations page, which is a link here on the left side. This gives you an important timeline of important dates during the application process. This page will also have all of your application documents and video training modules. Now let's go to the Training tab on the UOVC website. Here there are options and opportunities for you to provide training and technical assistance. There are free statewide opportunities to all victim advocates throughout Utah if you feel that is needed for your agency. We encourage you to explore this page based on the needs of your advocates or agency. Finally, you'll see a link that says UOVC GMS. This is the link you will use to access the grant management system that I spoke about earlier. Once you click that link, it will take you to a login screen where you will be able to access the GMS once you have registered. This will always be your landing page when logging in. At the bottom of the page, you will see 4 application options for different funding sources. Click the Apply button to begin your application for state funds. You will need to select the correct application, which will include the award year and USAP for the Utah Sexual Assault Programs. Once you access the application, you will see blue tabs for each section that must be completed. Below these tabs, you will find the Files tab, where you can attach any required documents, and the Budget tab. In the Budget tab, select the appropriate year and begin entering your funding request. When entering your budget, ensure you have your completed budget ledger and the How to Apply for State-Funded Grants step-by-step guide available in your application instructions. Some sections of the GMS budget will require completion, while others will not. Following these instructions will help streamline the process and prevent unnecessary work. After saving your application, go to the top of the page and click My Applications. This will display a list of applications and previously funded grants for your organization. To reopen a saved application, locate the appropriate award record ID and click on the corresponding number. If you need additional support with a GMS application, please reach out to Melissa Wayment at mwayment@utah.gov. State sexual assault services funds are designated to assist victims of sexual assault by providing resources that promote safety, justice, empowerment, and healing. These funds also support education and outreach efforts to reduce sexual violence across the state. Allowable costs include direct expenses such as crisis intervention, counseling, emergency housing, medical and legal advocacy, and survivor support groups, as well as administrative expenses like staff salaries, office supplies, training, and data reporting. All expenses must be reasonable, necessary, and align with the agency's approved scope of work. Additionally, you can review the funding instructions for a more in-depth list of approved costs. Unallowable costs under the State Sexual Assault Services funding include fundraising activities, board member salaries, and research or studies unrelated to needs assessments or program evaluation. Funding cannot be used for offender treatment, domestic violence services, or any uses not approved or appropriated by the agency's legislative body. Additionally, expenses such as food, such as land or real property, major construction projects, or the acquisition of alcoholic beverages or entertainment are not permitted. Other unallowable costs include the purchase of gifts as well as food and beverages, except in emergencies for victims. Exceptions for food and beverage costs may be made by UOVC in specific circumstances.
Now we will move to the award requirements. First up is progress reporting. To streamline processes, progress reporting will now occur semi-annually. We will provide you with the progress report, which you will use to input your data and responses each quarter. The data requested will be standard information, such as the number of victims served with this funding and demographics. Reports are due twice a year, January 30th, covering the first half of the year, and July 30th, covering the second half. Programs may choose to collect data more frequently to maintain data quality. This is a reimbursement-based award. You must submit reimbursement or payment requests through the GMS at least quarterly for approved approved state expenses that were incurred during the previous billing cycle. These requests are due 30 days after the billing cycle ends. Each program is required to update its governing board twice a year. You should provide an update to the board on the award's status and progress towards intended outcomes. The governing board may be the local, state, or nonprofit governing entity, such as city council, county commission, or board of directors, receiving the grant funds. Best practices suggest presenting these updates during the first or second quarter, and again at the end of the award cycle. Program staff should participate in the presentation. Documentation of the governing board report, which can include meeting minutes or the meeting agenda, are to be uploaded to the files section of the GMS. Next is monitoring compliance. The retention of vital documents is essential to the successful grant management. Best practice includes creating internal folders for your organization to house all relevant records, such as supporting documentation for expense reimbursements, timesheets, receipts, etc., for that previous billing period. This will ensure easy access during the monitoring process. At a site visit, the UOVC monitor will ask questions regarding documentation and policies, tour the agency facilities, interview grant-funded staff, review grant progress towards stated goals and objectives, and may review any findings from past reviews. The grant analyst assigned to your award may accompany the monitors at site visits. We all appreciate the opportunity to connect and see you in person and learn more about the amazing work that you are doing. A desk review consists of reviewing documentation, such as supporting expense reimbursement documents, timesheets, agency policy and procedures, equal employment plan, and financial audits. You can expect that the UOVC monitors will conduct a desk review for each state grant once per fiscal year. Next is the certified assurances. Certified assurances are formal statements provided by UOVC to ensure that recipients will adhere to certain standards and obligations, typically indicating compliance with specific laws, regulations, or policies relevant to the funding. The certified assurances are available to read on the UOVC website. It's important to review the certified assurances to ensure that your organization can meet the requirements. No action is needed other than the review until funding is awarded and you receive an award letter. Organizations receiving funding will need to dedicate time to complete required training, such as the civil rights and discrimination policy training, the GMS training, and other funding-specific training. It is recommended to utilize the appropriate coalition for additional specialized trainings. Effective partnership and successful collaboration between UOVC and recipients of state funding include responsive and timely communication, adherence to all requirements and to the program scope of work, financial responsibility, timely submission of all reporting and reimbursement requests, and prompt notification to UOVC regarding pertinent changes at your organization, including changes to the POC, FPOC, and grant-funded staff. On this resource slide and in your instruction packet, you will find resources to help you with your grant application and management, as well as resources that provide sexual assault specific information and support for all of your programs, We encourage you to use these resources to strengthen and enhance your application and to further develop your programs after the RFP process.
Following sections will be specific by program. Once your section has been discussed, you are welcome to end this video and begin your application process. For Rape Crisis Centers, the purpose of this program is to provide funding to rape crisis centers across the state. These centers must employ sexual assault counselors who have completed at least 40 hours of training in counseling and supporting victims of sexual assault and work under the supervision of the center's director. Rape crisis centers are required to meet the 5 standards of care, which include a 24-hour hotline, crisis intervention, accompaniment to hospitals, law enforcement, and prosecutors' offices, advocacy, and public education. As of January 28th, your organization should have received an email with your fiscal year 2026 award amounts and funding formula letter, which is also included in your funding instructions. While the funding formula metrics remain the same as the previous year, The CODAR exams for fiscal year 2024 have been updated, which may lead to adjustments in award amounts by county. Please carefully follow the application instructions and submit your budgets and required documentation by March 13th, 2025 at 6 p.m. For coalitions, the general purpose of this program is to provide funding to state coalitions that address rape and sexual assault. These coalitions should use the funding to offer training and technical assistance to all organizations responding to sexual violence across the state. This includes efforts to increase access to services for underserved populations and rural areas. Coalitions should collaborate with the Utah Office for Victims of Crime to identify best practices, assess areas of need, and establish core standards for rape crisis centers. It is UOVC's responsibility to ensure that baseline victim services are provided equitably across the state. When applying for funding, applicants should consider existing victim services in the area and carefully evaluate potential collaboration opportunities, strengthen the overall response to sexual violence. As of January 28th, your organization should have received an email with your fiscal year 2026 award amounts and letter, which is also included in your funding instructions. Please carefully follow the application instructions and submit your budgets and required documentation March 13th, 2025 at 6 p.m. UOVC also requests that state coalitions actively participate in regular collaborative meetings throughout the year. These meetings are essential for sharing best practices, identifying emerging needs, and fostering coordinated efforts to improve services for sexual assault survivors statewide.
This is SANE funding. The general purpose of the SANE program is to provide funding to sexual assault nurse examiners programs to attend to the medical forensic needs of sexual assault victims. SANE programs must follow best practice standards and licensing statutes as defined by the International Association of Forensic Nurses, the Board of Nursing, and the Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault. A total of $650,000 is available to SANE programs. Funding requests are invited from eligible entities for amounts ranging between $20,000 to $70,000. These funds are intended to bolster the capacity of SANE programs to deliver comprehensive care, ensure timely access to forensic exams, and enhance support services for survivors. Please note that no award amounts are guaranteed, as funding is dependent on availability. Please carefully follow the application instructions and submit your applications and required documents by March 13th, 2025 at 6 p.m. The award funding for culturally specific programs is meant to provide support for sexual assault victims in Utah by making resources available to programs that serve specific cultural groups and underserved communities. It aims to build stronger connections with those communities and mainstream rape crisis centers. A total of $350,000 is available. Eligible entities can request funding up to $80,000. These funds are intended to strengthen the capacity of culturally specific programs to provide comprehensive sexual assault interventions, foster timely access to services, and enhance collaborations with other community supports. Please note, again, that no award amounts are guaranteed, as funding is dependent on availability. The application instructions and your application and required documents is also due by March 13th, 2025 at 6 p.m. Thank you for taking the time to review these funding application instructions. We are committed to supporting your efforts in providing critical services to victims of sexual violence across the state. By following these guidelines and submitting a complete and accurate application, You help ensure that resources are distributed equitably and effectively. If you have any questions or need further assistance, please do not hesitate to contact us. We look forward to working together to make a meaningful impact on those lives affected by sexual assault in Utah. Thank you.